Greetings. So I recently did some traveling, and I was just reflecting while I was traveling down the road. It's a good time to think and be careful. Um, but while I was traveling down the road, I was thinking about the original, I don't know, there's no good way to say this, but the story of God, what happens before in the beginning. And there's eternity, which is impossible to imagine. However, I will tell you, when I was a child, I grew up in a Christian home, and I am a Christian. And I remember a pastor, when I was a small child, saying something about, burning in hell for all eternity or being in heaven for all eternity. And I thought, there's something not right with that statement, because if it's truly eternity, then you have to always be there. There is no outside of eternity. And so eternity is not something you can step in or out of. There's only eternity, which is the eternal now. The now is all we ever experience. And so time is the limitation that each of us experience. That's just, there's really no way to describe it. The time is the illusion. We only experience now. We don't experience the past. We don't experience the future. We only experience now. But I'm digressing too much. I want to get to what I call the original story of God. Which we need to start with, if you're God, what do you do with eternity? You're all-knowing. It's just you. Congratulations. You can never experience surprise, thinking of an idea. Everything is already done. So you play this eternal game of hide and seek, where you divide yourself out. And each one of us is a piece of God, but we're not God. Okay, there is individualism to each of us. It's kind of like space, and I don't mean like air or, I'm talking about the actual space. So think of this. Think of a street, and it's got multiple houses on it. And inside one house is a space where a family lives, and that space would have its own story about the family that occupied that space, the four walls, if you will, that occupied that space. The house across the street would have its own story about the family that lived there. I'll even go a step further and say something happened to a house and it was destroyed, but a new house was built there, but the space remains the same. The space remains the same with a new house. And it's got new stories, but it's the same space. So there's a house here, there's a house across the street, there's a house down the street. How many different spaces are there? There's one big space. Each fragment of the space has its own story to tell, and by its own right has individualism. However, there's really just one big space. And so I just want everybody to know it's time for chili, by the way. Time for chili. Can everybody see my hat? It's time for chili. If you don't know, it's time for chili. So anyway, the original story of God. going back to God, think about it like that. How many eternal beings can there be? Just one. Well, how many infinite beings can there be? Well, as soon as there's an infinite being, then, as soon as there's a finite being, the infinite is no longer infinite because there's a border. So there's only God. All this that exists, the four dimensions, X, Y, Z, and time, are only illusions. There's only the mind of God. There is no X, Y, and Z. There is no distance between you and I. There is no difference in the space from one house to the next. There's only one big space. And that space is really just how we see it with our limited view. So there's only God in all of eternity. That's all there is. It's crazy when you have this revelation. It's crazy. But you realize, and it hits you hard, there's only God. And so what do you do with eternity? You split yourself up. And now all of a sudden you can experience surprise and shock and go on adventures and blah, 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 blah. So the nature is really loud today out here. I guess that's cicadas still hanging around. Sorry. But just think about that. There's only the mind of God. All this exists inside the mind of God. There is no thing, nothing, there's nothing, no thing that exists outside of God. God is all there is. No thing can exist outside of God. Time doesn't really exist. X, Y, and Z doesn't really exist. I've said this before in other videos, but when you dream, you could watch a baseball game and your favorite player hits the home run and it surprises you and you're sitting in the audience and you're surprised. But where's the ball field? My mind is only this big. Where's the ball field? It only exists in consciousness. God's consciousness is all there is, my friends. And we need to love and respect each other and understand that we are all together part of God's consciousness. There is nothing else. And sorry, I'm not doing a very good job holding the camera. I'm just chilling, I've been traveling and now I'm finally home, standing on my deck, smoking a cigar. I don't smoke cigars very often, but when I do, it's a time of reflection, a time of meditation. And I thought I'd just hit record, and I hope you enjoy it. I hope you find it thought-provoking. Hopefully I'm not too annoying. A lot of people get annoyed by this hat. But it is time for chili. When you see a fellow human being, understand that person in yourself is part of God's consciousness. Just like in a dream, you immediately have dissociative identity disorder. Your favorite baseball player hit a home run. You didn't know it was going to happen. You're surprised. You played the part of the baseball player. You gave that baseball player free will by giving yourself dissociative identity disorder. And each one of the characters in your dream has dissociative identity disorder. In a manner of speaking, you see. There's no way to discuss these matters without making some kind of violation. It's a concession. And you have to accept these concessions to hear what I have to say. And when you have this revelation, you realize it's a contradiction. It is. But my finite mind has to explain it the only way that my finite mind understands. It's not possible for a finite mind to understand eternity. People confuse forever and eternity all the time. And I hear it in the Christian church all the time too. And I am a Christian. I'm not bashing Christians. But to say, you know, you step into eternity. If it's eternity, you cannot step into it. Look, if I dream and I manifest myself in the dream, okay, that's like what Christ is. I mean, hang on. God manifested himself as Christ. The rest of us are pieces of God, broken off pieces, if you will. And there's degrees of separation. I think sometimes, I'm going to digress just a little bit, and people do some evil act, okay? I know there's a lot of evil out there, and the media likes to promote it, unfortunately. But I don't know. I mean, it's reality. But I always think of, I try to understand, how can somebody do this? I don't understand. Because we're so far removed from each other. God is in the middle, if you will. God's everywhere. That's all there is. I know. See, I sound hypocritical already. I get it. Every rung is a degree of separation, even though it's all the same. And so a person on the inner rung, closer to God, is so far removed from somebody from an outer rung that they can't understand each other. Somebody in an inner rung could say, man, how could you do such an evil thing? Some jerk on the outer rung, I still have Christian love for such a person, but they don't understand somebody on the inner rung, and the inner rung don't understand somebody on the outer rung. Anyway, if people would come to this realization that all of this is the mind of God, just like when you dream, it's all in your consciousness. We're created in God's image, and there should be some kind of fingerprint where we can understand these things, and we can understand these things. Anyway, I was thinking a lot about this as I was traveling. And now that I'm finally home and can relax, I just wanted to meditate on everything that I'd been thinking about, besides a bowl of chili. And I thought I would just hit record and kick it freestyle. I hope this helps you. I hope you find it entertaining. And maybe even I hope you're just a little bit annoyed with my hat. A lot of people get annoyed at this hat. And that's the way it is. But, if you're sitting there in eternity, what else are you going to do? You got somewhere else to be? Love each other. Know that we all come from God and that we're a part of God. We're a piece of God. Yes, we do have individualism. Respect your fellow human being and understand, just like the characters in your dream, we all share a common bound. We're all bound with this commonality. Forgive my poor language here, my language skills. Wenn du lieber, ich kann Schotte über and Deutsch sprechen. But it's the same stuff. Anyway, I'm just reflecting on the thoughts that I had when I was traveling. Thought I'd hit record. Listen, my friends, love each other. I love you. I do. Respect each other. Let's show each other some love, and I don't know. Just like in your mind, the baseball game. Where does the baseball field exist? You traveled 50 miles to go to the baseball. Where's the 50 miles? Where's the 50 miles? Only in your consciousness. The space between you and I, the space between one house and another, is only in God's consciousness. It's our limited, finite mind that experiences time. Peace, love, happiness is our true nature. Eternity is our true nature. Let me tell you something right now. Fire and brimstone, yes, I believe hell is a real place. Yes. Does it last for all of eternity? I think I just addressed that. No. Fire and brimstone is what a blacksmith uses to take a blob of metal, which is basically useless, if you will, and shape it into something that can serve a purpose for the master. Is fire and brimstone a pleasant thing to go through? Hell no, pun intended. But it serves a purpose. That's where Christ comes in. If you've sinned, and we all have, that price must be paid. Sooner or later, somebody has to pay that piper. Christ paid that price if you accept it. So the next question is, I'm gonna hit the hard questions, man. In this channel, I'm hitting the hard questions. What happens if somebody dies and they don't accept Christ? Do they go to hell? Yes. However, it's not what you've been told. There is punishment, yes. But that doesn't end there. God would never create a person just and then they experience torture for all of eternity. Why? What's the point? The metal blob in fire and brimstone. It's not an easy process. However, it serves a purpose to reshape that blob so that it can be useful to the master. All right. I think you see where I'm going with all this. I've rambled on long enough, just about long enough, and now finally long enough. I'm going to put the camera down, enjoy the rest of my cigar, and I hope you find this entertaining. I love you all, my friends. Be kind to each other, respect each other, and I demand, or not, have a great day. Cheers. Tschüss.